April 10, 1963, 9:13 a.m., Atlantic Ocean. 220 miles east of Cape Cod, the nuclear submarine USS Thresher transmitted a message to the surface ship USS Skylark. Experiencing minor difficulty, have positive up angle, am attempting to blow, will keep you informed. The voice was garbled, distorted by depth and pressure. For the next 4 minutes, USS Skylark attempted contact. At 9:17 a.m., Thresher sent one final, barely intelligible transmission. The only clear sound, the number 900. At precisely 9:18 a.m. and 24 seconds, the USS Thresher imploded 2,400 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. 129 officers, crew members, and civilian technicians died instantly, crushed in 1/10 of a second. Not a single body was ever recovered. For 60 years, the United States Navy classified the details of what happened in those final minutes. But in 2020, a federal court ordered the release of over 3,600 pages of previously secret documents, including acoustic recordings that captured the Thresher's final moments with chilling precision. This is what those recordings revealed. This is the documented story of the USS Thresher disaster, the worst submarine loss in United States Navy history. The USS Thresher was not just any submarine. She was the lead boat of an entirely new class, the most advanced nuclear attack submarine ever built. Commissioned on August 3, 1961, at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, the Thresher represented a quantum leap in submarine technology. She combined nuclear propulsion with a revolutionary teardrop hull design and advanced sonar systems. She could dive deeper than any American submarine before her, 1,300 feet, nearly twice the depth of previous classes, 278 feet long, 4,300 tons submerged. Faster underwater than on the surface, silent, deadly. She was designed to hunt Soviet ballistic missile submarines in the darkest depths of the ocean. In 1963, at the height of the Cold War, she was exactly the weapon the United States Navy needed. By early 1963, the Thresher had completed over a year of operational patrols. In January, she returned to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for extensive maintenance and system upgrades. For 9 months, shipyard workers and civilian contractors overhauled nearly every critical system aboard. On April 9, 1963, the Thresher departed Portsmouth for post-overhaul sea trials. Her mission: test all systems at maximum depth to certify the submarine ready for operational duty. 112 regular crew members were aboard, 16 officers, 96 enlisted men, and 17 civilian technicians, engineers and inspectors from Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and private defense contractors, responsible for verifying that the repairs had been done correctly. 129 people in total. None of them would return. Commanding the USS Thresher was Lieutenant Commander John Wesley Harvey. Born September 4, 1927, in the Bronx, New York, Harvey was a career submarine officer with 13 years of experience. A Naval Academy graduate, class of 1950, he had served on some of the Navy's most prestigious submarines. In 1958, Harvey was the senior officer aboard the USS Nautilus during the submarine's historic polar expedition, the first vessel in history to transit beneath the North Pole. He had extensive training in nuclear propulsion. He was known as competent, experienced, and by the book. On January 18, 1963, less than 3 months before the disaster, Harvey assumed command of the Thresher. He left behind a wife, Irene, and 2 sons, John Wesley Jr. and Bruce Walter. What Lieutenant Commander Harvey could not have known was that the submarine he commanded contained a catastrophic design flaw, one that would kill him and everyone aboard in less than 100 milliseconds. April 9, 1963, 7:30 a.m. The USS Thresher departed Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and rendezvoused with the USS Skylark, a submarine rescue ship assigned to monitor the sea trials and maintain continuous communication. Standard procedure for a post-overhaul deep dive test was methodical and cautious. First, a shallow dive to check basic systems. The Thresher completed this successfully. Next, a dive to half-test depth, 650 feet, to verify mid-range operations. Again, successful. The Thresher remained submerged overnight, as was standard practice. On the morning of April 10 at 7:30 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Harvey re-established communication with the Skylark. He informed them the Thresher would begin the final phase. A controlled descent to test depth, 1,300 feet. The descent would be incremental, 100 feet at a time, pausing every 15 minutes to verify that all systems were functioning normally. At 8 a.m. the Thresher reached 650 feet. At 8:13 a.m. she reached 1,000 feet. At 8:53 a.m. the Thresher began her descent from 1,000 feet to 1,300 feet. Test depth. Everything appeared normal, but between 8:53 a.m. and 9:09 a.m., something went wrong. Declassified acoustic recordings from SOSUS, the Navy's secret sound surveillance system, reveal what happened next. At 9:09 a.m., SOSUS detected electrical instability in the Thresher's power systems. The submarine's main electrical bus began fluctuating, a symptom of a serious problem in the engine room. At 9:11 a.m., SOSUS clearly recorded the sound of the main coolant pumps shutting down. The nuclear reactor automatically scrammed. An emergency shutdown. The Thresher lost all main propulsion. Without power, the submarine began to sink. At 9:13 a.m., the USS Skylark received the first communication from the Thresher in over 20 minutes. The transmission was garbled, distorted, but partially intelligible. Experiencing minor difficulty. Have positive up angle. Am attempting to blow. Will keep you informed. Immediately after this message, Skylark personnel heard a sound. Compressed air being blown into the submarine's main ballast tanks. This was the emergency procedure to force water out of the ballast tanks and bring the submarine to the surface. The sound continued for 60 to 90 seconds. Then it stopped. At 9:15 a.m., Skylark transmitted, "Are you in control?" There was no intelligible response. Only static and garbled noise. At 9:17 a.m. the Thresher sent her final transmission. The message was almost completely unintelligible. But SOSUS recordings captured one clear element, the number 900. Naval investigators believe this indicated the submarine's depth. 900 feet below test depth. In other words, the Thresher had descended to 2,200 feet, just 150 feet above her designed collapse depth. The crew knew what was coming. At 9:18 a.m. and 24 seconds, confirmed by multiple SOSUS arrays across the Atlantic, the pressure hull of the USS Thresher imploded. The acoustic signature was unmistakable. A massive pressure pulse equivalent to the detonation of 22,500 pounds of TNT. The sound was detected by listening stations over 1,300 nautical miles away. 129 men died in 1/10 of a second. The USS Skylark continued transmitting, calling, asking for status. There was no reply. Only silence. What happened to the USS Thresher? For over 60 years, the United States Navy conducted investigations, reviewed wreckage, analyzed acoustic data, and interviewed hundreds of witnesses. In 2020, a federal court ordered the release of thousands of pages of classified documents, including findings the Navy had kept secret for nearly 6 decades. Let's examine what we know and what the evidence tells us. Theory 1. Saltwater piping system failure. This is the official conclusion of the Navy's Court of Inquiry, convened the day after the disaster. After nearly 2 months of investigation, interrogating 120 witnesses, and compiling 1,700 pages of testimony, the court determined the most probable cause was a catastrophic piping failure in the engine room. Here's what they found. The USS Thresher contained approximately 3,326 silver braze joints in her critical high-pressure systems, seawater intake pipes, hydraulic lines, high-pressure air systems. Silver brazing is a method of joining metal pipes using a copper-silver filler material. It's faster and cheaper than welding. In 1963, it was standard practice throughout the submarine fleet. But it has a critical weakness. Silver brazed joints are significantly weaker than welded joints, especially under extreme pressure and repeated stress. During the Thresher's 9-month overhaul in early 1963, shipyard inspectors tested 145 of these brazed joints using a new ultrasonic inspection method. 20 joints, 14%, failed the test, 14%. The Court of Inquiry extrapolated that failure rate across all 3,300 joints aboard the Thresher. The conclusion? Approximately 400 potentially defective joints were present on the submarine when she departed for sea trials. The Navy's investigation determined that one of these joints failed during the deep dive. At depth, seawater pressure is over 1,000 pounds per square inch. A rupture in a saltwater pipe would create a high-pressure jet of seawater, like a fire hose, spraying throughout the engine room. Seawater and electrical systems do not mix. The SOSUS recordings support this theory. At 9:09 a.m., electrical instability was detected, consistent with seawater shorting out the main electrical bus. At 9:11 a.m., the main coolant pumps shut down, triggering an automatic reactor scram. Without the reactor, the Thresher had no propulsion, no power to blow the ballast tanks effectively, no ability to control her depth. Retired Vice Admiral Ron Thunman, who commanded a sister submarine to the Thresher, stated years later, "A pipe ruptured, and the spray grounded the electrical systems. It caused the reactor to shut down." This theory is supported by the timeline, the acoustic evidence, and the known deficiencies in the Thresher's piping systems. But it doesn't explain everything. Theory 2. Ballast tank blow system failure. Even if a pipe ruptured and the reactor shut down, the Thresher still had one way to reach the surface: the emergency main ballast tank blow system. This system uses compressed air stored in high-pressure tanks to force water out of the ballast tanks, making the submarine buoyant enough to rise to the surface, even without engine power. It's the submarine equivalent of a parachute. But the system failed. The SOSUS recordings captured the crew's attempt to blow the ballast tanks at 9:13 a.m. Compressed air was heard blowing for 60 to 90 seconds, then it stopped. Why? After the disaster, Navy engineers tested the ballast blow system on the USS Thresher, a sister submarine to the Thresher. They discovered a critical design flaw. The high-pressure air system contained strainers, small mesh filters designed to prevent dirt from clogging the pressure reduction valves. But when high-pressure air expands rapidly, as it does during an emergency blow, the temperature drops dramatically. This is called the Joule-Thomson effect. If there is any moisture in the compressed air, it instantly freezes into ice crystals. Those ice crystals coat the strainers. The strainers collapse under the pressure. The airflow is blocked. The ballast tanks don't fill with air. The submarine doesn't rise. Testing revealed that the Thresher's compressed air system had inadequate moisture removal. At test depth, with maximum pressure differential, the blow system would ice over within seconds. The Court of Inquiry concluded, restrictions in the piping system, coupled with excessive moisture in the compressed air, led to ice formation and subsequently blocked the path of air to the ballast tanks. Thresher could not return to the surface. Even if the crew had done everything correctly, even if Lieutenant Commander Harvey had executed perfect emergency procedures, the submarine's own design prevented recovery. Theory 3. Control surface jamming. Declassified SOSUS analysis suggests another factor may have contributed. The submarine's stern planes, the horizontal control surfaces used to control depth, may have jammed in the dive position. Between 8:53 a.m. and 9:09 a.m., the Thresher was supposed to be conducting a controlled incremental descent, but acoustic analysis indicates the submarine entered an uncontrolled dive during this period, descending faster than planned. If the stern planes jammed, the submarine would have been forced into a steep dive angle, accelerating downward despite the crew's efforts to level off. This would explain why the crew reported having a positive up angle at 9:13 a.m. They were fighting the controls, trying to pitch the nose upward, but the jammed stern planes were forcing the submarine down. Control surface failures were a known fleet-wide problem on high-speed nuclear submarines in the 1960s. The Thresher was no exception. The truth: a cascade of failures. The declassified documents released in 2020 reveal that the USS Thresher was not destroyed by a single failure. She was destroyed by a cascade. First, a control surface problem or developing pipe leak created stress on the submarine's systems. Then, a saltwater pipe ruptured, likely due to one of the 400 defective silver braze joints. Seawater sprayed into the engine room, shorting the electrical bus. The main coolant pumps shut down. The reactor scrammed automatically. Main propulsion was lost. The crew attempted an emergency main ballast tank blow. The blow system iced over due to moisture in the compressed air and collapsed strainers. The ballast tanks filled with air too slowly to overcome the weight of water flooding into the submarine. The Thresher continued to sink. At 2,400 feet, 450 feet deeper than her designed collapse depth, the pressure hull failed. No single component failure would have destroyed the Thresher. But together, these failures created a situation the crew could not survive. At 2,400 feet below the surface, water pressure is approximately 1,038 pounds per square inch. For comparison, at sea level, atmospheric pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. The Thresher's pressure hull was designed to withstand the crushing force of water at 1,300 feet, her test depth. The hull was built with HY80 steel, a high-strength alloy with a yield strength of 80,000 pounds per square inch. But steel has limits. At 1,950 feet, 1.5 times test depth, the Thresher's hull was designed to collapse. This safety margin was supposed to give the crew time to recover if they exceeded test depth, but the Thresher sank to 2,400 feet, 450 feet beyond collapse depth. At that depth, the pressure hull could no longer resist the inward force of the ocean. A small breach developed, likely at a weld seam or structural weak point. What happened next occurred in 1/10 of a second. Water rushed inward at 2,200 feet per second, the speed of sound in water. The initial breach triggered a cascade failure. Adjacent hull sections collapsed under the unresisted pressure. The remaining compartments imploded simultaneously. The Thresher did not sink slowly. She did not flood gradually. She was crushed. In 100 milliseconds, faster than the human nervous system can process pain or fear, the entire submarine collapsed into fragments. The crew never knew what hit them. Modern submarine implosion research confirms that no human body can survive such an event. The pressure differential is so extreme that tissue, bone, and cells are obliterated at the molecular level. No intact bodies were ever recovered from the Thresher. The energy released by the implosion was equivalent to detonating 22,500 pounds of TNT. The acoustic pulse was detected by SOSUS listening stations over 1,300 nautical miles away. The wreckage came to rest on the ocean floor, 8,400 feet below the surface, more than 1.5 miles down. For 5 months, the United States Navy searched for the Thresher. On September 6, 1963, the bathyscaphe Trieste II, a deep-diving submersible capable of reaching extreme depths, located the wreckage. What they found was a debris field spread over 33 acres. The submarine had been shattered into 5 major sections and countless smaller fragments. No compartment remained intact. The sail, the conning tower, was identifiable, with the hull number 593 still visible. But there was nothing left to recover. The Thresher had been obliterated. On April 11, 1963, the day after the disaster, the United States Navy convened a formal court of inquiry. For nearly 2 months, investigators interrogated 120 witnesses. They compiled 1,700 pages of sworn testimony. They analyzed 225 charts, drawings, photographs, and technical exhibits. On June 6, 1963, the court released its findings. The official conclusion: a flooding casualty in the engine room is believed to be the most probable cause of the sinking. But the court also identified systemic failures across the submarine fleet. Deficient specifications for critical components. Deficient shipbuilding practices. Joints covered by insulation were not inspected. Deficient maintenance standards. Deficient operational procedures. Deficient crew training for emergency situations. The Thresher was not an isolated failure. She was a symptom of a fleet-wide problem, and the Navy knew it. 2 months after the Court of Inquiry concluded, the United States Navy established the SUBSAFE program, the most comprehensive quality assurance and safety certification system ever implemented in any military or civilian organization. SUBSAFE stands for Submarine Safety Certification Program. Its purpose: provide maximum reasonable assurance of watertight integrity and recovery capability of a submarine. Every system exposed to sea pressure or critical to flooding recovery must meet SUBSAFE specifications. Every material, from the smelting of steel to the installation of a single bolt, must be fully traceable and documented. Every joint in a pressure boundary must be welded, never brazed. Every component must be tested at operating conditions. And every person involved in submarine design, construction, maintenance, or operation must complete annual SUBSAFE training. The program is non-negotiable. If a submarine is not SUBSAFE certified, it does not submerge. Since the SUBSAFE program was fully implemented in 1968, the United States Navy has not lost a single SUBSAFE-certified submarine. Not one. The USS Scorpion, lost in May 1968 with 99 crew members, was the last American submarine to sink. She was not SUBSAFE certified. Every submarine class since Los Angeles Seawolf, Virginia, has operated under SUBSAFE standards. Thousands of submariners have gone to sea. Thousands have returned home safely. The men of the USS Thresher did not die in vain. Their sacrifice created the safest submarine fleet in history. 129 people died aboard the USS Thresher, 16 officers, 96 enlisted sailors, 17 civilian technicians from Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and defense contractors. Behind them, they left an estimated 400 family members, widows, children, parents, brothers and sisters. Among the dead was Paul Alfred Garrett, a marine engineering technician from Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. He was aboard to verify that the shipyard's repairs had been done correctly. He left behind a family, 2 sons, Tom and Mark Garrett. 62 years later, Tom and Mark still attend the annual USS Thresher Memorial Service, held every April in Kittery, Maine. They represent their father and all 17 civilian technicians who perished. They ensure the memory of the Thresher is never forgotten. Also, among the dead, was electronics technician 2nd Class Samuel Joseph d'Abruzzi. His family maintains a memorial storyboard displayed at the annual ceremony. After 6 decades, they still honor his sacrifice. And Lieutenant Commander John Wesley Harvey, the commanding officer. He left behind his wife, Irene, and 2 sons, John Wesley Jr. and Bruce Walter. Irene Harvey testified before Congress after the disaster, advocating for submarine safety reforms. She received a posthumous Navy citation on behalf of her husband in July 1963. Every year since 1964, the submarine community has gathered to remember the Thresher. On April 12, 2026, the 63rd Annual USS Thresher Memorial Service will be held at the R.W. Trape Academy Auditorium in Kittery, Maine. Hundreds will attend. Submarine veterans, family members, active duty Navy officers, government officials. There will be storyboards documenting individual crew members, a 2-bell ceremony honoring the fallen, a wreath laying at the waterside, red roses cast into the water, one for each of the 129 men lost. The Thresher rests on eternal patrol, 8,400 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Her crew will never come home, but they are not forgotten. In 2019, retired submarine commander James Bryant filed a lawsuit against the United States Navy. Bryant had commanded the USS Guardfish, a sister submarine to the Thresher. He believed the Navy had improperly withheld unclassified documents related to the disaster for over 50 years. He was right. In February 2020, a federal judge ordered the Navy to release the documents. Over the next 12 months, the Navy declassified and released more than 3,600 pages of investigation files, acoustic analysis, and testimony. What those documents revealed was not a cover-up, but something more troubling. The Thresher disaster was not caused by a single catastrophic failure that could have been prevented. It was caused by systemic design flaws, inadequate quality control, and operational assumptions that proved fatally wrong under real-world conditions. The declassified SOSUS recordings confirmed the exact timeline of the disaster. At 9:09 a.m., electrical problems began. At 9:11 a.m., the reactor shut down. At 9:13 a.m., the crew attempted to blow the ballast tanks. At 9:17 a.m., the Thresher transmitted her final message. At 9:18 a.m. and 24 seconds, the pressure hull imploded. 4 minutes and 15 seconds from the first sign of trouble to total destruction. The crew did everything they could. Lieutenant Commander Harvey and his men followed emergency procedures. They fought to save their ship. But the submarine's own design, the silver brazed joints, the inadequate ballast blow system, the moisture-laden compressed air, prevented their survival. The Thresher was, in a very real sense, built to fail. Today, every United States Navy submarine is SUBSAFE certified. Every joint is welded. Every system is tested. Every material is traceable. Submarine crews train annually on the lessons learned from the Thresher disaster. They study the cascade of failures. They practice emergency procedures designed to prevent what happened on April 10, 1963. NASA studied the SUBSAFE program after the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986 and again after Columbia in 2003. The safety culture created in response to the Thresher loss became a model for high-risk engineering programs worldwide. International submarine forces, Russian, Chinese, French, British, German, have adopted similar comprehensive safety standards based on the SUBSAFE model. The Thresher's legacy is not just the 129 men who died. It is the thousands who lived because of the lessons learned from their sacrifice. The USS Thresher lies 220 miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, 8,400 feet below the surface, in total darkness, in freezing water, in silence. Her wreck is protected as a war grave. No salvage is permitted. No disturbance of the site. 129 officers, sailors, and civilians rest on eternal patrol. The ocean keeps its secrets. But the declassified recordings, the voices, the sounds, the final moments captured by SOSUS, tell us what happened in those last 4 minutes. They tell us that the crew fought to save their ship. They tell us that the systems failed them. They tell us that 129 men died not because of incompetence or negligence, but because the technology of 1963 had limits that no amount of skill or courage could overcome. And they tell us that their sacrifice, though it could not save them, saved every submariner who came after. The USS Thresher disaster remains the worst submarine loss in United States Navy history. But because of what we learned, it will also be the last.